picture. I know in the previous one we weren't able to, well, let me summarize the problem that we faced before. So we hit the landing page. Okay, so we hit the landing page. We click through the products, and ideally, if the script that we went over before had worked, we would have went through each of these products, right? And like for instance, simple scenario would be log in. You click the first product, go back, click the next one, go back, etc., etc. But it wasn't doing that, and it was actually a, a little caveat that I missed. It's just one of those exceptions or errors that you'd come across in your day to day. I just at the spot I happened to overlook it, but it's an important one. So it's called the stale element exception, and let me replicate it again just for the sake of this video. So I got Eclipse out, and I'll leave this as the format in which we'll base this video, but let me kind of segment it a bit so it's easier to see. So obviously going back to so I wrapped up everything we did in a test website function, and I'll just run it here. So let me just invoke it here so I don't have to do it again. Okay, and obviously we have all the expats. I don't think there's anything else here that I forgot to add. We should have everything set up just as before. So you go into the website, and you're in the login page. You enter your username and password. You click the login button, but that's when the problem started, and that's where we'll put the fix here. But not before replicating it again, just for the sake of this video. And then obviously after whatever you do, you sleep, just so you could see your you see the results of your scripts for 2.5 seconds, and then you quit. But let's replicate what we were seeing yesterday. All right, so right here, you're right now in the base page. And what we did off the bat is we got all the products in this page and put it in a list, like so. And the XPath for the products is right here, div class inventory item name. Let me just make sure that one more time. Inspect it. And yeah, inventory item name. Right. So we put that in a list. See how I want to do this. So it's obviously it's a list of web elements, element, we'll just say product equals driver dot find elements by dot xpath xpath for products Okay, so that should contain everything, all of the title names, at least all the web elements for the title names in this variable called products. Let me enlarge that a bit. And how we thought it would work is, well, let me just type it out first. How we thought it would work was we could just go down that list, because right now obviously it's a list of web elements. You take the size of it, and obviously it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and that's what this would produce. And since the 0th index would contain that first products, we would start there. So I dot, well, now it's a web element, and so now you get to click it. So now this is what would happen, and since I is equal to 0 in the first iteration, you click it. Oh, timed out. Okay, so at this step, it would click it at I equals 0. It would click that first product, and then we thought we could do something like this. Right, and we thought it would just go down that list, go back from here, click the next one, go back, click the next one, go back. So let's run it and see what happens. Once again, just for the sake of the video. Test website, yep. Go to the login page, go back, and obviously it just stops on the product page. It doesn't go into the next one, right? It actually throws this exception, which I think yesterday we weren't getting because I surrounded it with the try catch block, and you'll come to understand what that does. But for now, you see that there's a stale element exception. So what happens, and this slipped my mind at the time because I don't hit this error, and you'll see why in a future lecture. I don't hit this error because there's a workaround for it where it's not something you have to constantly worry about, but it's easy to forget once you haven't hit it in a while. So what happens is, how a website works is anytime you log in or hit the landing page, in this case for the first time, you generate, let me just inspect it. So you generate a new, well, it's going to be the same exact, it's going to be the same layout, obviously, unless the developer goes on and changes it. But there's always going to be, I don't know the specifics of it, but anytime you hit a landing page, there's going to be some um, kind of background value that you're not seeing that changes a bit. And what that happens to do is, anytime you get the source of the web element at one time, and if you reload it, and I know this is like some kind of, it's a little higher level, so just kind of bear with me right now. It'll make more sense in a bit. So anytime you refresh it, it just so happens to be that even though you have the exact same XPath to the same exact product, reloading it makes this stale. That's just what they call it. And what happened before, if you think about it, we were able to click this, right? And then it reloaded to this page. So again, this wasn't reloaded. We hit it, right, for the first time. So that's why we were able to navigate back. But once we come back to it, the fact that we had stored the products at line 48, right? So let me say that one more time more clearly. So at line 48, the first time we landed, because you send keys to the username, you send keys to the password, you click into the dashboard. At line 48, right when you landed here, you did have all the updated elements that was contained here, right? But as soon as you clicked that first product, right, everything's going good so far. But then when you go back to that landing page, even though you definitely have the same exact references here, that element, because you had stored it at line 48 before, that just becomes what they call stale, and that's what refers to the stale element reference exception. I hit it a few times in my day-to-day, but there's just a workaround for it, and that comes later. But for now, this is what you do, because we don't want to get that far ahead, and we still want to show an actual example of you being able to click through all the products without hitting this exception. So let me just so this is still useful right here, because you still want to get the size of, so clearly you can't refer to the web elements here directly, right? And I'll show you what I mean by that. But finding elements, it's still useful because at the very least, you could get the size of the products, because you need to feed something into the for loop so it knows how many times to iterate. And the only way to know that is to get the elements at first when you first land here, and obviously get the size of it. So instead of locking all of those web elements that end up becoming stale, why not just get the size of it to at least have something to feed into your for loop? Because this still does, we still have to click it. That's our requirement, right? So at the very least, let's get the size of it, right? Because we need something to feed into the for loop. So let's do this. Instead of making this list of web elements, let's just get let's just call it int number of products. And obviously this is going to throw an error because this is throwing back a list. But since it throws a list, we know that we could just get the size of it, right? And that returns an integer, and now it's fine. And now we could now we have an actual number to work with. Okay. And Let's delete that for now. Okay, so now we do have something to iterate with, but we're still not clicking through the products. So the first time we land on it, how about we find the elements? And this is going to be a very it's going to be hard to justify at first because you're constantly calling this method. So let me type it out and you'll see what I mean by it. Sorry. And don't worry about this. So instead of the navigate to back method, I just decided instead I want to click the back button here, and I just happened to get the XPath for it beforehand. Here's the XPath right here. All I did was I inspected it to get it over here. Button ID equals back to products, and as you can see, it's the exact same thing. I just decided to use that instead of the back button for now. But you could have done either or. So what I did there, and let me actually run it this time, and then I'll explain why this worked and why for this I'm not getting the stale element exception. Let me just make sure everything is good, and yeah, let's hit run. All right, logs in. There you go. It's too fast to even process for us, but it did, and you'll see later on your own that it did cycle through all the products this time. Where previously it was stuck on this product page. Um, so the reason it worked, and it did work, it went through all. I know it was fast to process, but you saw. You saw the products and you saw that red T-shirt at the end, signifying it. Process the final link. So the reason why it worked. Again, let's go through that flow one more time. You land on the product page, you click that first product, and then you go back to products. But just as I said before, if I had locked in like I did previously, and I should have probably left it as a comment for easier visualization. If I had locked it in line 48, that web element reference would have become stale, right? So instead of processing it all in line 48, feeding it all into a list, I just happened to run that same method, right? Because if you run the method at that point, it's going to be like a new reference to it, right? And it's not going to stale out at 48. It's going to reference the same exact product, but the session it's going to be updated, right? So at this point, like um, just walk through it. So find elements, and I decided to get all the elements at the same time. And the reason why I didn't do find element is I just didn't want to bother through. So let me show you why I did find elements and not elements in this case. So if I did find element, right, all the individual product, they're not distinguished by their class name as we saw, right? So that's going to be kind of a problem. So instead of doing that, I just decided to lock it all in a single list and iterate and get the individual items using the for loop values. So I found, and then there's an easier way, a better way to do it. It's just I'm just doing this for just to kind of run through this scenario really quickly. Um, so so anyway, so I found the elements at each stage, and obviously for when I equals 0 or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, this will get updated dynamically, right? So anytime you go to it, back out, because of this, you're referring to an updated element, right? Same reference, but it's just going to be updated. It won't be stale, I should say. So that's that, and you should try this yourself to ensure that that made sense. But it's a small idea, um, and it's just something you gotta kind of get used to. But we'll find a workaround in a bit. Another thing I wanted to go over. So that was one example, and let me. I guess I'll comment it out for now. So this part's going to be quick. So I do want for the upcoming homework I'm going to post, I do want you to know how to interact with this filter button, and it's slightly more involved, not really, but you'll see why it's slightly more involved. So the XPath for this, you could do it yourself later, but the XPath for that was, I have it somewhere else. So I decided to get lazy about it in that since this is the only, well, let me show you. If I inspect it, you'll see that tag is select, and I don't see any of the selects here, right? So usually that's bad practice. You do want some kind of other signifier, but to keep this video short, if you see that, well, let me pull up that program, wherever it is. Hmm. I think I got the wrong one open. Give me a second. I think this should work. Oh, there it is. Select. Okay. So I'm gonna get lazy in it for a reason because I see a select tag and it seems to be the only select tag here. So even if there's one kind of down this list, somewhere down the page, I could see visually, right? I could see that visually this is the first select tag that's gonna get hit. So I could have specified specifically, the class name or the data test because they seem to make it more unique. But in this case, it's not really necessary. So if you look here, if I do select. This is the only one it selects, right? It went down the entire DOM. That's what they call it, and we figured out this is the only select class, so we're good here. So we use this XPath alone to reference this filter button. So let me put that here, and I'll call it string XPath. Well, let me move it so it's more easier to see. So XPath for filter button. Copy paste. So again, I'm in the landing page now. Just like always, you still inspect that filter button as you would any other of the other elements in the page. So in this case, I'll do find element by that XPath, uh, XPath for filter button. And since it returns a web element, I'll lock it up in a web element for now. Filter button. Okay, everything is good. But the thing is, this element is not something you could type into. You could click it, but it's a little more, clearly it's more specific, right? It's not directing you somewhere else. What I mean by that is clicking this and clicking this will produce different results, and clicking this will produce different results, right? If I click this, it takes me elsewhere. Hang on. So obviously clicking this takes me somewhere else, and it's different from clicking this, which keeps me in the same page, but it gives me a few different options. So because of that little distinction, the developers for Selenium decided, all right, let's just put it in a different class. There has to be some kind of relation to it because it's still a web element. So it's still a web element. You found it, and right here, the filter button, you have something to do with it. But in this case, instead of clicking it, which you can do, and you could test that out yourself, but just clicking it, clearly because there's more options, and I'm not going to run it. I'd rather have you do it yourself to kind of experiment. If you click it, it's kind of useless because you have all these other options. But how would you click this? If I try to right click this, um, whereas here I could inspect it. You just how it, with how it was designed, the DOM can't capture. Well, it can capture it, but you just can't inspect it directly. You would have to run through that DOM and go down. Let me show you what I mean by that. So if I inspect it, and based on how specific this dropdown is, you'd have to go down this, and I'm pretty sure you could run through that route where you're going down this list, and depending on the option, so you see here name A to Z refers to this one, and Z to A refers to this one, etc., etc. You could do it that way, but if there's a if there's a more efficient workaround, you could there's a good chance that the Selenium developers found a better way to kind of program it, so it's better for us to use. So what I mean by that is instead of capturing that web element alone, again, I could have clicked it, but instead of doing that, there's another class called select, right? So let me import it. Yep, I imported it, but you could see there's still an error, and there's a reason for that. So obviously, it's expecting an argument. So what do you think that is? That argument? It would be that web element, right? Because let me show you what happens if I lock that filter button up in here. So that disappeared. So now it has that reference to that filter button. And now, whereas here, if it were just the web element, I would be reduced to having, not many options to play around with the different types of functionalities with the dropdown. I have more functionalities here that I wouldn't have here, right? So let me show you. Select dot, and you can see you just have more options, right? Select by index, select by value, uh, select by visible text. And I urge you to, so I'll give you, and there's another one that I actually want you guys to test out. Get all selected options. I mean, what do you think that does? It's pretty much in the name, right? It's most likely what that does. Well, what it does, I'll just tell you. It just gives you all the options here, and then it locks it up in the list, and you could clearly see the utility of that. So I'm not going to run through it, just to keep the video short and to kind of urge you to experiment with yourself. I suggest looking through that select by. You'll see select by. Yeah, just type in select by, which would be all the methods for you to interact with the filter button. Run through them yourself and see what they each do. I recommend looking into select by index and get all selected options, and figure out how to use that yourself. So that refers to, well, that kind of goes over the how to use this web element. Lastly, and you'll see why I cover this in your homework. And this actually has nothing to do with Selenium for now, but you'll see how it'll help you in a bit. So in the homework, I'll just tell you what it is. Let me just type out the function in mine. So what I actually wanted you to do, and to start building out your framework. So I want you to see if the filter function actually works. I should call it the sorting function. That makes a lot more sense. It's not really a filter. It's a sorting option. I want you, now that you know how to use this select field, I want your script to go through each of these options. Well, you could leave out low to high, actually. So actually, just the first. Yeah, let's say the first two. So obviously the first one does A to Z, and it's supposed to sort in order of the according to the alphabet. So S comes before T, so this looks right? But as the website develops in the real world, you'll never know when this could break, right? This could be a T and this could be an S for this sort. which would be wrong, right? So your job is to go through those first two options, right? And here you do the opposite, that it goes from T to S, right? So you go through each of these options and you'd make sure the first ones, in this case, Z to A, is, in accordance with their, alphabetic kind of order. So since T comes before S, since T comes after S, and since we're filtering it or sorting from Z to A, this should come, T should come before S, right? And it looks like they started all of these with an S, so you're not going to see much variation here. But obviously, T should come before S. But in if they had a product starting with a B or an F, obviously that would come here, right? Let's assume they'll add more product. Your code should account for that. So we'll leave it off at this last way of handling it. So obviously I tell you the get text function where you actually retrieve the characters of the web element. So think about how you do it. And obviously if you get the text, right, and let me show you what I mean by that. Let's say ABC. So let's say you're getting a string called ABC. And let's call it A, right? And I'll let you know why I capitalize the first character. So characters in Java work such that they each have different values. So the way they kind of establish the ordering. So for instance, the way they would know, or the way they would kind of find the distinction between A, B, C, D, each has their corresponding value. So in this case, since B is greater than A, whatever number it has as the character. So let's say, let me show you what I mean by that. It would be better if you could see it in real time. So let's say, char letter 1 equals A. So far so good. Char letter 2 equals B. And the main difference between a string and a character is, for a character, we briefly went over it. I know mainly we've been using strings, but at times you might want to use a character. Is if I put more than one letter here, that's when it throws me an error, right? Each has to be referenced by itself, and you note the single quotes where previously for strings we had double quotes. That's how Java notices which one you're referring to, which is which. And let's see what happens if we print out. Let me see. There was a way to get their ASCII value, and ASCII is just a way to order them. So this would, since B comes after A, it would have a higher ASCII value. Let's not go over that right now, but we'll do it this way. If letter 2 is greater than letter 1, which it should be, right? Naturally, B is greater than A. You want to think of it that way. We'll say letter 2 is greater than letter A, or letter 2 is greater than letter 1. Else, let's just say letter 2 is not greater than. Letter 2 is not greater than letter 1. Let me run it. And obviously, since I'm telling you this is greater than, B is greater than A, this should give me that first condition. So let me run it. And obviously, letter 2 is greater than letter 1. So let me try the reverse, B, A. So letter 2 is not great. So clearly A, B, C, it's going through that kind of order, right? And the reason you would need that, well, I'll leave it to you to figure out. But clearly, in order to find out if this is in the proper Z to A, or let's leave it to A to Z order, you're going to need to do something with that, right? You need to get that first character of every, well, you'll go down it, right? Since S and S are the same, you have to keep iterating or going down that string until you hit the kind of main character that um, that makes this come after this, right? So this, in this case, it would be sauce labs instead of the same. You keep going, uh, capital B the same. But since lowercase a comes before lowercase I, this goes first, right? A to Z, right? And you should figure out how to do that. And there's just one more thing. So notice that I picked lowercase a and b. So that works. Or let me see how to phrase it. So, like I said, every character has a different numeric signifier, right? This has a greater one than this, but it works differently for, let's say, capital characters, right? So that's going to be a problem here because they capitalize it here. And let me show you what I mean by that. So let's pick something in the middle. So A, B, C, D, E, right? And let's run it first as it is. So this should be letter 2 is greater than letter 1. Okay, that's fine, but let's see if what happens here. So this still works. What that means is the capital letters come down further after the lowercase alphabet. And let me show you what I mean by that. So letter 2 still greater than letter 1. But what if I did this? So now it's saying letter 2 is not greater than letter 1, right? So clearly the larger cap characters have a different signifier, right? So letter 2 is not greater than, it's saying even though lowercase e comes after D, capital E, because it's a part of the capital character set, that comes before the lowercase character, right? So that's going to be a problem, since that's going to kind of screw up your method here. And in order to resolve that, I recommend doing this. So obviously when you get the text, you'll get them as strings. So let me comment this out. So let's say you get a string like this. Let's use my name, BIK. Right? So in this case, what I would do, and I would simply make it easy for myself. I would convert the entire string to a lowercase, right? And let's see what it looks like now. Actually, this returns the new string. So in this case, I'd have to put it in here. So let me run it. So that's fine. And one more method to keep track of is, so now it's nice and lowercase, but I still have to get good at well, I'd have to iterate through each character, right? In this case, like I showed here, you have to go through each character and make sure I is greater than A in order to tell that it goes from A to I in this case. So in order to do that, what you want to do is use that character at function, right? And let me show you what I mean. So let me, so this should still happen. Let me actually lock this up, and let's say string lowercase equals a dot to lowercase, because now I have to refer to this, right? So instead of doing a, which is here, I'd have to, let me take this out. instead of referencing the string here, I want to get the lowercase version. Let me go through it. BIK, right? And in this case, if you want to compare each of the individual characters, remember it's a character. It's returning a character, not a string. So why that's important is regularly you're used to comparing strings like this, lowercase dot equals, right? And then you compare it to another string. But in this case, since it's a character, you treat it like an integer. And what I mean by that is, for instance, let's say, so obviously this says BIK now, right? So let's say if I wanted to find out if that middle character is I. So I would do it like this. Let me run it. So it hits character once, right? Because there's one I. And if you see it, the main distinction was I grabbed that character, right? Each iteration. At iteration 0, I grabbed that, well, not here, over here, little lowercase b. And it's asking if that lowercase character is equal to I, which at first it is not, because it's at b. You print hit character. So b doesn't work, but once it hits I, then it's I, and then it says hit character, right? And let's try one more thing. Let's say if that character is greater than b. Just think for a second what would happen. You should pause and just kind of think. So once I iterate it, obviously at first it won't give me print that out, right? But since as we established before, I and k, and based on alphabetical order, I is greater than b and k is greater than b. So ideally, well, what's going to happen is it's going to print this out twice, right? Hit character, hit character. So this is just kind of something to keep mind of, because once you capture the strings and to find out which title is greater or is in accordance with this filter function, it's just something you got to know. So I know that was a lot. Just take some time to process it, but I feel like this exercise will kind of be of great use to you, because this is a common test case where you're making sure a big functionality like this works.